Welcome to Her Media Diary, the podcast where African women share their real stories, bold moves, and behind the scene moments that shaped their journeys. I'm your host, Dr. Yemisi Akimobola, and with each episode, we're pulling back the curtain on what it really means to build a media career, break barriers, and stay true to your voice. So, whether you're starting out or you're already making waves in the industry, this space is definitely for you. So, my guest today is a powerhouse in global journalism, Stephanie Busari, CNN's former Nigeria bureau chief and head of CNN's Africa digital team. From breaking major stories to reframing how Africa is represented on the global stage, Stephanie's work has challenged stereotypes, moved hearts, and changed policy conversations. In this episode, we talk about the ethics of storytelling, the responsibility of media in times of crisis, and what it takes to lead in international journalism as an African woman. Trust me, you want to hear this story. We've been trying our best to get technology to comply today, and it's quite hot
Yeah.
where you are there in Lagos. But thank you so much for joining us for the podcast. Um, I'm going to start with kind of getting to know your history. I know you grew up in Lagos, but spent some time maybe in the north. Tell us about that time, that period in your life.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be part of your podcast. I'm a big fan of the work that AWIM does, and
Thank you.
I've followed it for years. So, congratulations to you. And yeah, thanks for being patient with the tech issues. You know how we roll. But
It's
yeah,
all
so
right.
my childhood.
Yes, yes, NEPA and all that.
Exactly. We'll get there. So I was born in Lagos in late 70s, and I remember kind of very happy-go-lucky middle class existence. My parents had good jobs. They were not fabulously wealthy, but we lived a comfortable life. And I was born in Lagos, like I said, but we moved to the north of the country. We moved to Jos soon after I was born, and my brother was actually born in Jos. And after that, my dad's job took him to Kano.
Mm.
And so I'm very familiar with the northern parts of the country. And I have very fond memories of growing up in that part of the country. But then after a while, we then moved back to Lagos. And in the late 80s, about 1986, if I remember correctly. And I also went to boarding school briefly in that period. And I think I was in boarding school for 2 years in the 1980s when my parents decided to move to London. They were part of the kind of 80s wave of the Jakba, the Nigerian phenomenon, immigration phenomenon, which many people think just started now, but obviously immigration has been part of this country's history for many years. And I even remember at the time that there was a TV advert asking, there was a young man called Andrew in the advert, said, Andrew, don't check out. So Japa is not a new thing. And, it's part of the human condition to seek new horizons and try to get exposure to different climates and different climes, etc. So my parents thought they would be away for 5 years or at the most,
So,
because yeah, I'll let you jump in.
So I'm really interested in what you said about living in the north for a bit. We have that in common because I mean, not so early on, but when I moved to Nigeria in the early 2000s, I actually went to University of Maiduguri. So I have some
Oh,
experience in the
nice.
north as well. What was life like growing up in the north during that period?
Do you know one thing that I really remember is the food, actually.
Yes, yes, me
So I remember all these like sweets, like these sweets, like sugared sweets, and like I had baobab powder the other day, and I just had such a wave of nostalgia because the powder, like I remember we used to like dip our fingers in the bag and like just lick the powder
Fingers in the
from the baobab tree. And you know, the food in the north is actually very, very good. I wish more people would be exposed to it.
yeah, yeah. Interestingly, masa. I don't know if you had masa. And I'm pretty sure you've had
Yeah,
masa.
I love
But
masa.
every time I was pregnant, with my kids, I would be craving masa. And actually, for my, I think my both my second and my third child, that's how I knew I was pregnant because of masa, craving for masa. It's so interesting. But yeah, I mean,
Fantastic,
food is
fantastic.
definitely something that I miss about the north. Yeah. So continue
Yeah,
telling us what it was like growing up there, and for you
yeah. So
also how it
you know,
shaped who you became.
so I remember Jos being very cold, you know, and people don't often think about that. Like Jos has a very, very kind of mild temperature, you know, very cold. And we used to have these big blankets that we still had. We took with us when we travelled from Lagos to London. We took this huge blanket with us. I don't know why, but you know, I just remember that we took that. But yeah, you know, it was a nice, comfortable childhood. Like I said, you know, this was before the insecurity that started, because now when I when I read about that
Mm,
insecurity, I it's just feels like such a foreign place, you know, like we lived in harmony with our neighbors. Like, so in Kano we lived in a district, I think, which is kind of known for having a lot of Christians, but we lived side by side from what I remembered with our neighbors. You know, there was no conflict. But then in later years, those conflicts started to happen. But yeah, you know, the North, I have very, very fond memories of. And actually, according to my parents, I learned to speak Hausa quite fluently.
okay.
Unfortunately, I've forgotten many, many of their vocabulary, but I surprised myself when someone's speaking, I can pick up words like abinchi and makaranta and, you know,
Mm.
menene sunanki, menene sunanka. Like these are words that I remember obviously from like muscle memory, but I can't speak the language anymore. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting. Did you feel a sense of affiliation with the North? Because I mean, later on we'll talk about your work around the Chibok girls and things, but I just wonder how foundational was your time at in the North to kind of the kind of things they went on to do.
To be honest, you know, I didn't feel that it was a northern thing or whatever. I just felt like I was a Nigerian.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
was obviously a Yoruba girl being brought up in the north, but I have a affinity with the country, with the oneness and the unity of the country. That is something that I really expound. I really think that I have cultural pride in my Yoruba heritage, but also it as my Nigerian identity is actually quite important to me. So there was never in my mind. I mean, I was very young, but I don't remember feeling like I'm not from here. You know, it was just this is where I live. I'm a Nigerian girl. This is where I live. You know, and I love that about, you know, part of what I've traveled a lot, and I like to assimilate cultures. I like to learn languages. I like to find out about people's cultures. That's something that's just innate in me. And so it's not a surprise that I became a journalist because of that curiosity about people, about life, about their stories, and telling their stories. So, yeah, I would say probably quite foundational, but just maybe a part of who I am
Yeah,
fundamentally.
yeah, absolutely. And of course, you then moved to the UK, as you said. And I think this discussion about identity and how we see ourselves as Nigerians is quite an important one, and especially one that I often get into with my Nigeria-based friends, right? Because I'm in diaspora, I'm in Nigerian diaspora. I've spent more of my life in the UK than I have in Nigeria, and therefore I see myself as a Nigerian. And I remember having this conversation with some friends who are Igbo, and I was like, but I see myself,
Mm,
and they were so surprised by that, the fact that I see myself as Nigerians. I
mm,
think that is to do with that diasporic kind of identity that we both share. Uh,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts around that and sense of identity?
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody is allowed to shape and define their identity in how they want to.
Mm,
It's a fundamental human right. But I think also you have to look at the context of the Igbo tribe in Nigeria.
yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I think when you consider that context, it's not surprising that many people cling to the Igbo identity very tightly, just because of the difficult past that
The
Nigeria
history, yeah,
has,
absolutely.
with the
Yeah.
civil war, the Biafra movement, and all of that. So, within that context, it's not surprising. And I actually remember having the same conversation with someone who was in Igbo tribe, and they were very adamant that they were Igbo first before Nigerian. And I found it surprising at the time, but looking back, I think that, you know, given the historical context and the terrible kind of like
Atrocities, yeah.
suffering that they have faced,
Yeah.
it's not surprising. Yeah.
Absolutely. So how old were you when you moved to London?
I was 12. I was 12 and I was just becoming a teenager. So it was quite a tricky time. I mean, gosh,
Yeah.
being a teenager in London versus being a teenager in 80s Nigeria, extremely different. I was very bookish.
Okay.
I was very bookish and very like so coming from school in Lagos in Nigeria, and I was also in school in Ogun State. So I've lived in several different states, and the attitude to education was you have to be the best.
Yeah.
And I remember in my secondary school, first form, it was always me and two other boys that were like always like first, second, third. Second, I would come first, and they would come second, third. I would come third. They would come. It's just us three, and so I was brought up with this competition around academics and do your best and vie to be the best. It was total contrast when I went to London because we went to a kind of inner city comprehensive, and you know it was not the same. So there was a lot of students who were not interested in learning. They were not interested in like learning was not cool.
Yes, I
Being
remember
academic
that.
was not
Yeah.
cool. Raising your hand in class was not cool. And so it was kind of like, oh my god, she's a teacher's pet, she's a goody goody. And so I got a lot of names, and I was bullied actually. And this was a time when being African was not cool. So Africa boo boo, all of those very insults that you got. So definitely, it was a difficult transition. And it was a difficult transition going to inner city London, where there's socioeconomic issues. There's kind of like a lot of societal kind of ills that you have to navigate. And of course, I didn't understand that at the time. I just saw that like people who look like me were bullying me. So yeah, I was unhappy because I thought London was going to be like streets paved with gold, you know? And then we were
Yeah, I think
just
that's the
like,
general misconception, isn't
right,
it?
everybody, oh my God, you're going to London. And I thought like I'd won the lottery in life. I mean, don't get me wrong, being in the UK was very beneficial. I got a good education. And I went to university in the UK, and most of my formative years were spent in the UK. So I owe a huge uh, debt of gratitude to the UK, in forming and shaping who I was, who I became as a person, but uh, also to Nigeria. I'm a British Nigerian, very proudly so. And
But I
yeah,
mean, let me just pause you there because I think you can be both grateful
yes,
and also still have your lived experiences that were
of
quite
course,
hurtful.
of course,
You
yeah,
know and that shapes you. I think you see a lot of that in different levels. Even when you have a mentor or somebody who's your sponsor, so to speak, in a place who you can be both grateful to, but also recognize that they are also part of the problem,
Oh
as
yes, for
well, right?
sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, definitely confronted a lot of prejudice and discrimination. Yeah, I think most Black people have that lived experience in the UK, being followed in the shops, and you know. But London, by and large, is very cosmopolitan. Although people have their pockets, like there's quite a lot of segregation. You know, I don't think there's a lot of mixing when I was growing up anyway, there was not a lot of mixing, even though London was very cosmopolitan, attracted lots of different people from all nationalities. Everyone stayed in their pockets, everyone stayed with their groups, which may in itself, I suppose, is not a bad thing. But
So you moved to London when you're 12, and obviously that had both positive and negative impacts in terms of like cultural identity, in terms of expectations, and in terms of your own lived experience as a Black woman in this space that you kind of expected a lot from. How would you say all of those formative years in the north, in the south, in Nigeria, and all of that? How did that contribute to, or did it have any impact on your path towards journalism?
well, I think that for me, my journalism career, it's just quite innate. I just have a natural curiosity. I love writing. I love people, and I love talking to people. I love finding out about their stories. So maybe those experiences did shape that in a way. But I just think it's quite innate. It's something that I discovered very early on. I was lucky through encouragement from one of my secondary school teachers. I was fortunate to have discovered that at that young what I wanted to do, you know. So that's why I think it's quite innate, and I would even go as far as to say it's a calling.
Yeah.
It's something that I was born to do. Is to document, to tell stories, to to be a chronicler for our times. That is my calling. Yeah.
Mm-mm. And am I right in saying that your first kind of experience in journalism was the Daily Mirror? Is that correct?
Well, before that, so my very, very, very first ever byline was the York Evening Press.
Wow.
And I know, yeah. So I went to university in Leeds, and part of my course, you had to do this, what we call an attachment, 6-week attachment to industry. And I was fortunate to get a job for those 6 weeks on the York Evening Press. So I would commute between York and Leeds. At that time, I think I was in my second year of uni, and it was fantastic. I was just like in my element. I loved every moment of it. And on my first day, it was a fire had broken out, and I think someone died in a fire.
Okay.
Tragic story. And I went with
Right.
the chief correspondent, the chief reporter, and I was like knocking on doors. What happened? Just being the cub reporter, with like very enthusiastic. And so the chief
Yeah.
reporter was so pleased, I guess, with what I did, that he put my name on a byline, so that on the first day ever, on in a journalism, in a newspaper newsroom, I got a front page byline. I was just like, oh
Wow.
my god. I was just over the moon. I was so elated, and I did really some solid reporting work on the Evening Press in York, and it's good grounding for a journalist, and it's grounding that a lot of people don't get anymore. It's what we call good old fashioned shoe leather journalism, where you're
Yeah,
knocking on
absolutely.
doors. Yeah,
Absolutely. But then also it was an internship.
yes.
And I think we're kind of having different perspectives on the importance of internships now in media. What are your thoughts on that in terms of kind of how these early stage engagement with the industry through internships can really benefit you towards a flourishing career.
Well, in my view, it's invaluable. It's invaluable. Just the fact that you're able to go and experience what it's like without commitment. You don't have to commit yourself to it. When I did it, it was unpaid, so I'm not even sure if they paid for my transport. To be honest, now I can't remember. But I felt so privileged to be doing it. I was learning, and the good thing about internships is that when they're good, when they're well structured, when they're intentional, you can get such a lot out of it. I remember, that chief reporter did not have to give me a byline, but because he was trying to help a young person come up, he was like, "No, she did the work. Let her have a byline on the front page."
Yeah,
That's like you know the most valuable real estate in a newspaper. But they also were invested in seeing me succeed. So they would always I could go and ask them questions. They would ask if I wanted to go on jobs with them. They would ask if I wanted to, watch them do certain things. So it was just such a learning experience for me. I just soaked everything up. And that's everything to do with your attitude. It's everything to do with how you present. It's everything to do with how enthusiastic and willing you are to learn. So when you show that, people do show up for you, and because they remember more often than not, when they were starting out and the opportunities that they were given. So mentorship and internship is so important to me. For example, when I came to Nigeria 9 years ago with CNN, I set up our first intern scheme in Nigeria,
okay.
for CNN, because it was just such a something that I thought was so valuable. And also when I was in London, prior to coming to Nigeria, I ran our department's internship scheme. I oversaw that. And then at one point I looked around the newsroom and I realized that I had recruited more than half of the people that were now doing so well in their careers at CNN at the time. I had recruited more than half of them. So it was something I felt very proud of. And it wasn't just recruiting. I poured into them. I mentored and coached them. So it's something that's extremely valuable. What's not valuable is the exploitation of interns. And I remember also advocating for interns to be paid while at CNN, because there was a point where interns were not paid. And it meant that we attracted just a certain type of interns who could afford to work unpaid. It was not a diversity of experience in terms of class, of, like socioeconomic backgrounds. So it's important that internships are structured, intentional, and more importantly, paid.
Yeah.
You might not get paid the big bucks because you're actually learning, and you are a bit of a drain on resources because people are having to tell you what to do, and they're having to invest in teaching you while you're learning on the job. So you don't expect to get the big bucks, but at least give them a living wage, something to cover their their expenses. And actually, one person that I wanted to shout out because of just the enormous impact that he had on me and other interns when I was at CNN is Richard Quest. Richard
Yes.
Quest is one of the best known faces on CNN, bar none, perhaps. And he did not have to give his time, but he would set up afternoon sessions, lunchtime sessions just for interns, and he would take that on himself to teach and mentor the next generation of journalists. No, like management didn't ask him to do it. He just said, come and go over here, in his Richard
Yeah.
way.
The way
And
he
he would
talks
just
there.
gather them and he would pour his knowledge into them. The first ever moderation gig I did was at Oxford's African University. They asked me to moderate a panel, and there was going to be a president on the panel. And of course, I said yes. Yes, I can do it. I'd never done it. The first person I went to was Richard. And Richard said,
Understood.
"Oh,
Yeah.
oh come over here." Took me to sit on the guest sofa in the London bureau, and he said to me, "This is how you do it. You never sit in the middle. You never turn your back on the guest." He just gave me so many fantastic tips that just really I remember to this day. So good mentors, good structured internships will always stick with you. So I absolutely encourage it.
Hey there, something really exciting is coming up. It's the African Women in Media 2025 conference. We are bringing together journalists, editors, media leaders, policymakers, academics, creatives, the tech community, investors from across the world convening on the 4th and 5th of December 2025 at the African Union Commission building in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, under the theme of Beyond Commitments, Advancing Policies for Gender-Safe Media. You'll expect to have powerful keynote sessions, hands-on workshops, exhibitions, important networking opportunities, and through the AWIM Pitch Zone, which we are reintroducing this year, you have the opportunity to meet with media development funds and pitch to them your media business ideas. Tickets are now on sale. It's a great time to secure your spot. To find out more, go to AWIM25, that's awim25.africanwomeninmedia.com. Join us at the African Union Commission in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia on the 4th and 5th of December for the African Women in Media 2025 conference. You don't want to miss it. Yeah, it's so interesting the story you just told because I don't know if you know this, but I interned at CNN and I think I missed you by a year. I think you came into CNN a year after I'd finished at
Okay,
CNN.
I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
and I,
Oh
I
wow.
and I interned on Richard Quest's show.
Oh,
so
amazing! I did not know
so
that.
everything you just said about Richard Quest, I absolutely agree because that was the experience I had with him. I
Wow.
remember he was I remember it was this Quest on Quest show. And I remember there was an episode I worked on where he was interviewing, who was this guy that likes to do like extreme like adventure. I can't remember his name anyway. So he was gonna
Steve
be kind of
Irwin,
interviewing him. No, it's not Steve
the
Irwin. I'll
Australian
try and
guy. No,
remember before we
okay,
finish. No, no,
okay.
it's not. It's not. It's not him. But yeah, so I remember I'd done my research notes, and the producer sent it to him. He was on the plane when he got it, and he texts back some excellent notes, and da 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 da. Da. He was so happy. And when he came back, he actually invited me to his office, and we talked through. I asked him for tips on present. It was so welcoming and so open and so approachable. So I absolutely agree. And I think for years after I finished at CNN. I would email him once in a while, just say, "Oh, this is what's happening," and he would reply.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
what you said is so absolutely correct, and I think that level of accessibility to leadership it's so important as well.
yeah.
And I mean, you went on to have a trailblazing career from print to digital, leading CNN's first digital and multi-platform bureau in Nigeria. What moments would you say stood out as defining in your leadership journey?
Oh wow, gosh, there's been so many. I mean, just even coming to Lagos to start up this bureau from scratch for to and then report and edit and do everything that I had to do. It's well known within CNN that I was just this one woman bureau, and with very few resources, but we managed to make amazing things happen. So some standout moments for me is obviously like the Chibok reporting, which I think has come to define my career and has won me like many awards, including a Peabody Award, a Gracie Award, and many others. But it's not for the accolades. The Chibok reporting is a story that I've tried to walk away from many times because I've just said, okay, like even someone even told me, you don't want to get known as that Chibok girl. But
Mm,
it's a blight on this country's conscience that
mm, mm. We're gonna, Stephanie. We're
300,
gonna come back to
yes,
the Chibok. We're gonna come back to the
yes,
Chibok girls 'cause I think it's such an important
yeah,
story and period in your career, but also as a journalist in that space. And again, like I said, I went to University of Maiduguri, so that part of Nigeria is also really important to me. But before we
yeah.
get there, I want to ask you about that process of come from London to Nigeria. I don't know whether you'd been stayed long term in Nigeria since you moved to the UK. So that transition, that migration back to Nigeria. So there's that aspect that you're dealing with, but then also
Yeah.
setting up this bureau and it's you doing it. Like, just talk us through that and how did it come about, and what was your experience doing that?
So, I mean, I think it came about because I put my hand up actually. So before that, 2012, I'd covered Occupy Nigeria. I'd covered Occupy Nigeria remotely, and I'd done something, internally that everybody was like, "Oh wow, this is so important. Like, we love this reporting. We love, whatever." And at that time, I didn't think that CNN had a correspondent in Nigeria, and I was working on digital. I was working on digital, and I now wrote to one of the bosses, and I said, I put my hat in the ring. I said, "This is my background. I'd met that person once. This was like senior exec, and I said, this is me. I want to go and work in Nigeria. I want to be your correspondent there because I see that you don't have anyone there, and these stories are so important. We have to cover them. And as you can see, we got such traction. The importance of putting your hand up and saying, I'm here, because that person, I suddenly went on their radar. I didn't get that role then because, frankly, I was not qualified to do it. I'd never done any TV work. But what it allowed me to do was to become almost like the Nigeria specialist within the organization.
Mm,
And so when an opportunity came that there was another vacancy in Lagos, they now created a role where a digital person, but someone who didn't wasn't traditional from a TV news background, could
mm,
go in, run the first digital bureau for the organization anywhere in the world, and also become the first responder when there's a breaking news story on air. Like, no one else was doing that role within the organization. It was such a pioneering role, and there were a lot of mistakes, a lot of things that I would do differently now. I was trying to do so many things at once. I was
mm,
so overly ambitious for that role, and I was really trying to just be like almost like a martyr. But I think we managed to recruit an amazing team of journalists. And I was very, very determined that they would be Nigerian journalists. I want African people telling African stories, just because of the context, the nuance that they can bring to the storytelling and the reporting. And there's people like Bukola Adebayo, who now works at Reuters, who came to us from Punch, and she kind of was at the coalface of what we were doing. There's people like Aisha Salahuddin, who is very bright, very talented journalist who joined us. Anu Adoye, who's now at the FT as their West African correspondent, was one of our first interns. So, it was just like I managed to, through the guts and the blood and the sweat and the tears, managed to assemble quite a really lovely team of journalists who were ambitious, who wanted to tell really great stories, but we didn't have enormous amounts of resources to do it. So we managed to tell great stories. So one of Bukola's stories was the story of a girl who recorded her lecturer soliciting sex for grades. She was very brave, Monica Osagie, very brave girl. She recorded it. She gave CNN the only interview, and after reporting, this lecturer was jailed. It was prosecuted and jailed, unprecedented.
yeah, yeah.
And it's we were so happy to be able to like be a part of change in such a ridiculous case of abuse of power, right? And even the Nigerian Senate asked questions like, and changed certain elements of the law because of that reporting. So very proud moment there. We also identified the first Nigerian Me Too cases. Women who spoke out openly about their stories of sexual assault, of rape, of just it was part of that whole global Me Too wave, and we were able to speak to those women and convince them to share their stories. And of course, NSARS, our reporting on
Yeah.
NSARS, which
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
nominated for 2 Emmy Awards and was, upheld by the Nigerian Judicial, the Lagos State Judicial Review, that there was shooting of protesters, unarmed protesters. So like there's been so many defining moments in this role, but beyond the reporting, it was just creating this bureau from scratch and bringing on these bright young talents and giving them opportunities that with an international broadcaster that they would never have had otherwise. And seeing their trajectory just makes me so happy. We didn't always get it right, but for the most part, I am so proud of the work that I did in my 9 years at the bureau.
Absolutely. And, as we know, women in media leadership, talk less of ownership, still remains largely underrepresented globally, not just Nigeria, not just Africa, globally.
Yeah.
And I'm just listening to your story there because you're doing it in a number of things. And I hope you realize that, that you realize what you achieved there. Number one, like you said, you put your hand up, right? Number two, you came back, you emigrated back to Nigeria. So you're dealing with that kind of transition also. Number three, I mean, you said you didn't have a lot of resources, so you're having to build this new innovative thing from scratch with very little resources. And at the same time, all those names you're mentioning are people that you were mentoring, you were taking through the process, and you yourself are probably also just still learning on the job as well,
Yeah.
right? So when you reflect on that journey, um, how would you say you navigated those challenges and the barriers, and how did you face them? If you can take us back to back then.
Gosh, there were a lot of challenging moments. Just even being a woman in that role. I remember, so we had one intern, another very bright young man who came from the UK, and he's British. And, sometimes going to meetings and people addressing him because they think he's my boss, you know,
But
right, but he's an
yeah,
intern. And, he never did anything to encourage it, but just simply being a white young man, a white man, automatically meant that he was perceived to be the leader and not me, who was the leader. And there were those kind of like internal biases that you had to navigate. Just they're inherent, you know. I had to navigate just the resources issue, having to be the producer, be the correspondent, be the leader of the bureau. It was such a huge kind of, it took a toll on my time, at times my mental health, because I was doing so much. um, you know. But that's what I said. I was being a martyr because I didn't have to do all of those things. But I have just like this kind of very, very strong determination. Like I wanted to make it succeed. Could I have put my hand up and asked for help earlier? Yes, most certainly. So that is a big takeaway. Ask for help. And I was working remotely. My bosses have no idea of the challenges you have to navigate with the traffic and the
yeah,
lack of infrastructure and all of those things, and even the internet. So you're joining morning meetings and you're dropping off calls, and they're just like, "Oh, what's going on? Like, oh, Lagos, like, what's happening?" But it's just a different set of challenges that they have no concept of. In the end, I had to say to one of my bosses, "I need you to come to Lagos. I need you to come and see what we are facing here." And she did. She did. She was one of the best bosses that I've had, her name Blanit. And she came and she saw the challenges, and together we kind of worked through, like, how do we like navigate this and make sure that you have the support you need, and then you can deliver what you need to. Because my primary role was editing the digital side, editing digital CNN Africa digital. But at the same time, you have this other demanding role where I became the de facto correspondent. I was meant to be a first responder for TV, but I was getting, like, on the TV side, I was also getting demands for live hits. And, so at some point you just kind of have to go, oh my goodness, how do I do all of these things? And then you're managing a team on top of that. So, when I look back, I'm like, wow, you really did do all of those things alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and, with very little support, because I didn't ask for support. So that's one thing I would always say: don't be a martyr, ask for support. And sometimes you just got to let things break,
Yeah.
because if you're extremely capable, they will just keep piling on the work. But if you just, like, let things break, they'll just be like, "Oh my God, we need to get legal support. We need to, because, like, something broke and it's got to be fixed." And that's when they realize that, well, actually, that we gotta step up here. So, reflecting, that those would be my takeaways. Ask for help, don't be a martyr. Prioritize. I could have just said, this is all what I'm being asked to do. Which one should I do? Which one should I do out of all these things that you're asking me to do? But I just took it on. I just took more and more and more. So my health suffered. My family life definitely suffered, at some point. you know um and so, yeah, I think I was the first Nigerian and the first woman, you know to lead a CNN bureau anywhere in the world. So I think I felt that pressure of, I gotta make this
Yeah.
work. I gotta make this
Yeah.
work. I gotta succeed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but even if I'd just done a tenth of what I did, we would still have been very successful.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. You
yeah.
said that your family life was impacted. How was it impacted?
Well, so I was a single mom at the time, and my daughter was 5.
Wow.
When we came to the UK, to from the UK, and so, there were many late nights. Luckily, I had relatives staying with me, trusted relatives. But there were many late nights in the office where I wouldn't see her, like, apart from in the morning when, like, I tried to do the school run,
Hmm.
whatever. But in some of those years, my family life, like, my daughter's, kind of, my time with my daughter did suffer, for sure. You know, and I look back on that with some regret, you know, because they're not that age for very long, and they need you. So, um, yeah,
As somebody who's
that's
gone through the
something.
leadership process, as a media leader yourself now, imagine now you are leading an organization where a new Stephanie Busari is going through that. As a leader, what would you do differently? Like, not
Uh,
as a person, but as a person, like putting this other person in that position.
yeah, a whole lot more support, a lot more clarity around the roles. So, because I was doing, like, 3 things in one role, I was, like, being a TV correspondent, I was editing the digital channel, and I was also managing a team. I would put a lot more processes and clarity around the roles and expectations. I would put that in, so that that person knows that, actually, this is what you're expected to do, you know? So, in terms of that, and then I kind of suffered a little bit because there were change in management structures when I was going, and there's some things that I'd been told I was going to do, and when I got there, things shifted a little bit. So, just, you know, um, I think being clear about expectations, offering more support, and not, because news is such a fast-paced game, and everybody's just, like, in a go motion, and so there's not much time for reflection in terms of, what do you need, what do I, so building that reflection time in, is critical for anybody who's leading. You know, building in the reflection time, building in the time to say, okay, here's feedback. You did this. We like this, but we don't want you to do this, or we want you to do more of this. Definitely, all of those things would be something that I would put into place.
Yeah, yeah. So the Chibok girls, like you said, it's a story that you've come to be defined as, defined for as well. And you got the proof of life a video. So I really want to like
Yes.
sit in that moment with you, like that very moment when you realize what you got in your hands. Take it from there.
So, I mean, I got the proof of life video 2 years after the kidnapping, because I'd covered it. I'd made all these contacts. I was still living in London at the time in 2014 when the kidnapping happened.
Yeah.
We came to Nigeria. We covered it for like 2 or 3 weeks. We went back, but I stayed in touch with people. I stayed in touch. Some of the parents were calling me and messaging me like, oh, so they had this initial rush where the whole world's media came to their doorstep and everybody wanted to talk to them. We talked to a few of them, but after that, it was just silence. And they're now left to like grapple with this new reality of, well, okay, so we thought all of that attention was going to bring our daughters back. So I got the proof of life video in 2016, 2 years after the kidnapping, and everyone had moved on, and I had kept in touch with the parents and a few other people, NGOs, and people involved in this story. And I got a call to say there's a video, there's a video of the girls, and I said what? Because at this time we'd all kind of presumed that they were like sold into slavery, or presume the worst. They're killed in Boko Haram raids, whatever. Um, and this at this point, there's 219 girls still missing.
Mm.
None of them freed at all. And
Which is, I
so
mean, huge number.
a huge number,
You know.
right?
Yeah.
And so I met with them, and they sent me the video. And they told me that the video was filmed on Christmas Day. So many of the girls that were taken were Christians. So the video was
Mm.
filmed on Christmas Day the year before, 2015. And and so I knew it was filmed on Christmas Day 2015 because when I was trying to find it, the metadata had saved the video on the 25th of December on my phone. And so that also just kind of corroborated what they told me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we took this to my bosses, and they were just like, oh my God, we have to verify this. Got a team together of Nema Albagir and Sebastian Noops, who's a excellent videographer. And of course, Nema, everybody knows, is one of the kind of talented, um, you know, investigative reporters of our time. And so we all went to Maiduguri, and I was a producer on the shoot, and I had to call the parents that I was in touch with and say, okay, do you know these names? Like the girls were saying their names. Do you know these names? We wanted to bring the parents of the girls, as many as we could, to identify the girls. Anyway, we
Yeah.
got 3 or 4 of them, and then one of them was the women's leader who
Mm.
oversees the affairs of the women, the Chibok women. Yana Galang, we're still friends to this day. So they came, and I have never been on a more difficult reporting job as this story, in 2016. In Borno, we were in one of the hotels outside in Borno. We set up a laptop just like we're talking and
In
played the video.
Meduguri.
In Maiduguri,
In
yes.
Meduguri. Yeah.
In Maiduguri, yes. And they were sat around. Nema was showing them the video on her laptop. Do you know these girls? Can you verify that this video is true? And these women just dissolved into tears immediately. They were just like, oh my God, that's my daughter, you know, and they could see that these were the girls that had been missing for 2 years that nobody knew anything about. And it was such a poignant, powerful, and just one of the most moving things I've ever experienced in my journey as a journalist. You know, and one of the moms told me after that if she could have gone into the laptop and removed her daughter, she would have done. And you know what that means. Your mom,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know what
yeah,
that
yeah.
pain that she was talking about. And another harrowing moment came when Yana Galang, the women leader who came to oversee, she was looking desperately on the video for her daughter, Rifkatu. She was not there. And the breakdown, the tears, the scream, I will never forget it. She looked and looked and looked, and her daughter was not there. And Rifkatu is still not home, still missing, presumed dead. I don't know, but you know, Yana hopes that she's still alive. So you know, that was the verification process. We had to go and say, this is real. This video is real. And what happened next? Just beyond my expectations. So we verified it. Nema filed her report. You know, I did my producer role and got everything together, and then I wrote a story for digital, for CNN Digital, about the whole thing with one of our editors, and the response was just phenomenal. Like this was 2 years, 2 years after the story captured the imagination of the world. Michelle Obama was holding a "Bring Back Our Girls." You know, every celebrity was holding up "Bring Back Our Girls." You know, it really, for the first time, an African women were being advocated for in such a powerful way by the rest of the world. And so this story coincided with me moving to Nigeria. I hadn't moved to Nigeria by that point. This happened in April 2014, and by June I moved to Nigeria. And I remember one of the my fellow journalists from BBC journalist, saying to me, "You've peaked. Like what else are you going to report from now on?" I'm happy to say I don't think I peaked. I think that we
Yeah.
went stronger and stronger. But you know, so it was
Absolutely.
the story of the day. Like they were telling me that their newsroom, everything that was on the front page, everything that had been prepared that day was just abandoned. Get that CNN video, get that reporting, you know, and they could do nothing apart from license it from CNN syndication teams because the story was done. The story was done and dusted. Like we'd cleaned up the story. And it was just like, I love stories like that as a journalist. Like everybody just has to follow your reporting, you know, like there's nothing else they can do. So it was a big win journalistically. But what happened after, the Nigerian government changed the administration. So Buhari had just been elected and Jonathan had left. And so they kind of got kicked into gear, you know, to say, wow, you know, they're still alive. We must bring them. I don't know if they knew or not, but by this happened in April, by October, 21 schoolgirls were freed after negotiation talks with Boko Haram. And a Nigerian senator told me at the time that it was because of the video and the attention that the video got globally that spurred the Nigerian government into action. And there was one man I must shout out who has been there at the start of this. He's Barrister Zana. He lives in Maiduguri, and he was the one that actually was the mediator between the Red Cross. So the Red Cross, being a neutral organization, had the girls handed to them by Boko Haram, and he went to get the girls. And guess what? Because of him, Boko Haram decided to free an extra girl. They said this one is for Barrister Zana. It was supposed to be 20 girls freed. and they freed an extra girl because of
Wow.
him. I mean, he's known to them. He lives in that area, and the work he does in bringing peace is phenomenal. But anyway, that's a side note. So because of that video, and if I never do anything else in my life, I know that my reporting was so impactful in saving the lives of these
You
girls.
had
And
an
then the
impact.
next year, another 107 girls, I think, came out. And then now we've had some girls come out here and there, but that was the extent of the Nigerian government negotiation. And of course, money changed hands. They say that it didn't, but we know that money always changes hands in these situations. So yeah, there you have the Chibok story.
Yeah, and there's a number of things you said that really stood out for me because firstly, you said at the beginning when this first happened, there was the whole world's eyes on these women, right? On this story. Michelle Obama's picture is very famous. Also, you had some of the celebrities that was kind of just jumping on the
Yeah,
ride also, and then all of a sudden it all goes quiet,
yeah.
and that's the end. Everybody's done their trending stuff, you know. What keeps you going beyond the trend?
Well, many things, just forging that relationship with the parents. And like I said, they were bewildered. They really thought after this onslaught of media attention, this onslaught of people coming to our village, people like bringing us to Abuja, people bringing us here and their interviews, our daughters, they did it because not for fame, they wanted their daughters back. But then nothing came. And then they would write to me and say, but why is no one talking to us? Why is no one talking about us? Why does no one care
Mm,
about this story
they don't care
anymore?
anymore.
And I just felt
Yeah.
a sense of obligation to keep caring about it. Even if I couldn't get it onto the headlines, we had to find another story, another hook. So I would just reassure them. I would just pray with them sometimes. So I had to journalism, you're not a bot, you're dealing with some of the most tragic stories of our times. So you have to always place your humanity to the fore of your reporting. My humanity is always part of my reporting. So I had to relate with them on a human level and make them understand that I can't do anything for you right now, but I understand and I empathize. And that's what ultimately landed me the proof of life video.
Mm. All of that impacts your mental health, right? You're so in it. I can only imagine how emotional, even the lady that didn't find her daughter on the video, I can only imagine what you were like as somebody following this story for so long as well,
Yeah.
and so invested in it. And again, it's not just about the Chibok girls, it's also about NSARS and all the other kind of impactful stories that you've you've worked on, and that it cannot just end with that one report.
Yeah,
How
it
do
can't.
you how do you protect your mental health while still, like you said, applying your humanity and not giving up?
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough. And so CNN does help a lot. They give you counseling sessions. That's something that's provided after tough reporting stories. And whenever you want to access it, they make that available. So that is very commendable on the organization's part. You are given that support. But I don't know, you kind of develop an internal mechanism that allows you to switch off. Because if you don't, you will be dragged down. So you develop this extra shell, extra layer, whatever it is, that allows you to detach yourself somewhat from the reporting, detach yourself. I get to go home and hug my daughter that little bit tighter. I get to go home and just you know, look after myself and know that, okay, you know what? It's been a really tough day at the office, but so I must prioritize my self care. I don't do it well all the time, but I do like to make sure that I'm well looked after mentally. My family is very important to me. I spend time with them, relaxing, going out with friends, all those things that help you kind of like detach from what is ultimately a very tough job, actually. You're not working down the coal mines, but it's mentally draining. So yeah, it's prioritizing self-care and making sure that you really do it.
So you've gone on a tremendous journey, right? Nigeria to the UK, getting your foot into the door through internship. You spoke so passionately about kind of supporting younger generations, and then kind of taking that risk to put your hand up and see the journey has taken you to report on some of the most impactful stories of our generation. So, what hope do you have for the next generation of women leaders coming after you? What are you doing to clear the path for them?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, after 16 years, 16 very impactful, very wonderful years, a place where I grew up as a journalist and I found my voice as a journalist. I did leave CNN, and you know, it's it's been a it's been a roller coaster. And one of the things I've done, or I'm kind of working on in the aftermath, is a storytelling academy, which will train and empower the next generation. I'm really passionate about that. I want to maintain journalistic standards and storytelling standards, and I fear we're losing that every day. We're waging a battle with facts. Facts, facts are non-negotiable. Facts are
Yeah.
sacred, but we're fighting a losing battle where people present alternative facts or their own version of
Of the
facts.
fact, yeah.
Facts are facts. They are
Yeah.
not negotiable. They are.
Yeah.
It's just. I can't believe we have to say it, but
Yeah.
we're living in an era where we have to say it. But I have a responsibility to train the next generation to report in a factual way. This the reporting that we did at CNN, many it has its many detractors, but it was rigorous. It was fact based. It was solid. It was editorially like sound. It was checked and rechecked. You remember the row system where you had to defend line by line every single word that you wrote, in this kind of backstopping process, editorial process. So I really want to bring that rigor to especially African journalism. It's critical because everybody talks about changing the narrative. Everybody talks about, depicting a different version of Africa. But we can't do that if people don't even know how to tell the stories in the right way. It's not about sugarcoating. It's not about pretending that problems are not there.
Yeah.
It's about balance and accuracy. Balance and accuracy will help us to put our leaders, you know, to hold them to account. But you can't, there's such shoddy journalism going on right now, and people conflate what journalism is. People conflate journalism and PR.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just feel that I have 25 years experience in this field, and it would be a terrible waste if I did not impart some of what I've learned in those 25 years with some of the world's best media organizations. They may be accused of propaganda, they may be accused of whatever you want to call it, but these institutions prioritize facts based journalism. And that's what I want to create. I want to create an academy, a training academy that prioritizes facts based journalism and storytelling, that prioritizes the kind of storytelling that will serve us for the next generation who will tell our stories. I mean, my time as a storyteller, as a journalist, has come to an end in the form that I knew it. I probably, I don't never say never, but I don't see myself working in a newsroom
Yeah.
again in the way that I did. I now have a media company called SBB Media, and it's strategic communications, working also at high level with governments to tell their stories. There's so many things that governments are doing that nobody knows about because they're just not projecting or amplifying those things, or they simply don't know how.
So,
Yeah.
I just did some training with the first ladies of Nigeria. They're also doing some great projects in their respective states, helping them to amplify that. So that's a strategic communications arm. We also have a publishing arm where I just published a book called Her Story, Taking Roots
Yes.
and Sparking Change.
Yes.
That's 40 plus
Absolutely.
women, again.
I was gonna say it was really kind of all over social media. It's such a fantastic project.
Thank you. It was a labor of love. We did it in 3 months, but we got some wonderful women
Wow.
who shared their stories with us. They all contributed a chapter and said, I want to put my story out there, I want my voice to count. And that's what I do. That's my passion. Like I said earlier, this is a calling for me to document, to chronicle our time so that in future generations, people will say, these are the people from that time that mattered. These are
Yeah.
the people who made an impact, who created something worthwhile. And I read something about in 100 years, all of us will be forgotten.
Yeah.
We will be forgotten. And how well you're remembered is on how well you document your time while you were here. And you document, even with documenting, you have to be intentional about how you document. So I'm really passionate about making sure that women's stories are documented, that young Africans are equipped with the tools that they need to do that documenting properly. There's a lot of really great people doing really great things right now, but how factual is it? How balanced is it? How, you know, like kind of what, do they have the right tools to do that? And of course, AI is going to impact a lot of how we tell stories. And so I want to incorporate that in training as well. So there's a lot of work ahead. There's a lot of work ahead. I'm so excited. I've spent years, half a century, like a quarter of a century, building other people's platforms. So now it's time for me to build my platform that will change the face of journalism on the continent.
Absolutely. And if you had one thing that you want our listeners to take away from this interview today, what would it be?
Whoa, just one thing. Well, I would say put your hand up. Put your hand up.
Excellent. And on that note, thank you so much, Stephanie Busari, for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure
Thank
hearing
you.
your story and just hearing that inside kind of experience and walking the journey with you. Thank you so much for your time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I've had a wonderful conversation with you, so thank you.
Wow, what a conversation that was. Stephanie Busari really reminds us that journalism is not just about the headlines, it's about the impact, the truth, and giving voice to the voiceless. It sounds cliche, but that's exactly what journalism is all about. So, thank you for listening to this episode of Her Media Diary. And if you found this conversation inspiring, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with that person that really needs to hear it. If you'd like to join me on an episode of the podcast, you can drop me an email at yemisi@africanwomeninmedia.com. And you can also visit our podcast website, hermediadiary.com. Don't forget to hit that subscribe, hit that follow button on your favorite podcasting platform. And you can tune in to the podcast via our radio partners across Africa. And don't forget to join the conversation using the hashtag Media Diary. So until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep amplifying the stories that matter.